Let's go to another video, but first subscribe and leave a like to strengthen the channel. Now, let's go.
The storm had swallowed everything. The sky, the pines, the paths. Everything had disappeared beneath a white and furious wall that had been roaring for 3 days without stopping. In the depths of even Kia, a region so remote that maps hardly bothered to name it, the snow had already passed the windows of the small wooden cabin. Inside, Tamara, 79 years old, warmed her hands around a cup of tea and watched the nothing outside. She was used to silence. She had buried her husband nearby, raised her children alone in that cold, and learned, over the decades, that loneliness does not kill. Careless cold does. That was why she noticed it immediately. At the edge of the clearing, where the pines formed a dark wall against the white of the snow, there was something standing still. Tamara blinked, thinking it was fatigue. But it wasn't. It was a lioness, large, adult, her golden fur in violent contrast with the frozen landscape. And she was looking directly at the cabin. Tamara did not move. Her heart beat deeply, just once like a warning. The animal did not advance. It did not retreat. It stayed still, the body tense, the head low, the eyes fixed. Then it began to walk from side to side at the edge of the forest, nervous, almost frantic. It was the kind of movement Tamara recognized. She had seen dogs like that when their puppies were lost. She had seen cows like that when separated from their calves. That lioness was not threatening. She was asking. Tamara slowly stood up, put on her boots, the thick coat, the scarf wrapped up to her eyes. Her children, who called once a week from the city, would have panicked if they knew what she was about to do. But Tamara was 79 years old and had learned that certain moments do not ask for permission. They ask for courage. She opened the door. The wind cut her face. The lioness looked at her for 1 second too long, and then turned her body toward the forest. She stopped, looked back, waited. Tamara took the first step into the snow. She still did not know what she would find among those trees. But something inside her, older than fear, knew that she needed to go. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tell in the comments what you thought, and from which city or country you are watching. The snow reached the knees. Each step cost twice the effort, and the wind pushed Tamara sideways as if it did not want her to move forward. The lioness walked ahead, looking back every few meters, making sure the old woman was still coming. She never got too close. She never moved far enough away to disappear among the trees. It was a calculated distance, almost deliberate, as if the animal knew exactly how much space a human needed to keep trusting. Tamara breathed with difficulty. Her lungs hurt from the icy air, and she could no longer feel her toes inside her boots. She thought about going back. She thought about the lit stove, the cup of tea still warm on the table. Then the lioness stopped again, looked at her with those enormous yellow eyes, and Tamara moved forward. The taiga closed around them. The pines blocked part of the wind, but they also blocked what remained of the light. It was a different world in there, darker, quieter, older, the kind of place where the sounds of civilization had never truly arrived. That was when Tamara heard it. A faint sound, almost imperceptible. A small, high-pitched cry, muffled by the snow and the wind. It was not human. It was something smaller, more fragile, more desperate than anything she had heard in her 79 years in that place. The lioness stopped at the edge of a rise of land covered in snow and looked down. Tamara reached it and looked as well. At the bottom of a ditch nearly 2 meters deep, curled against the wall of frozen earth, there was a cub, too small to be more than a few weeks old. Its fur was damp and full of snow, its eyes half closed, its body trembling in a slow and very frightening rhythm. It had fallen there and had no way to get out, and it had been there for some time. Tamara felt her stomach tighten in a way she had not felt for years. The lioness stood beside her, her eyes moving between the woman and the cub down below. There was no threat in that gaze. There was something Tamara could only describe as a plea. A mother had crossed an entire storm to seek help. She had chosen a human in the middle of nowhere, inside a storm, and she was waiting, with a silent patience that broke the heart, to see if that human would respond. Tamara stood at the edge of the ditch for several long seconds. The wind howled between the pines. The cub below could barely lift its head, and the lioness beside her was as still as a stone statue. It was a heavy silence, the kind that does not wait. It asked for a decision. She evaluated the descent carefully. The walls of the ditch were frozen earth, covered with thin ice, without any safe support. Tamara was 79 years old, with bones that protested every morning and no rope. Her children would say it was impossible. Anyone with good sense would say it was impossible. She crouched down, dug her fingers into the edge of the ditch, and began to descend. The ice cut the palms of her hands immediately. Her feet slipped twice, and the second time she hung suspended for a moment that seemed too long, her heart in her throat, her arms trembling with the effort. But the bottom came. She was down there, the snow at chest height, the cold of a different kind, damp, dense, with no escape. The cub backed away when she approached, frightened, weakened, its instincts still trying to function. Tamara did not hurry. She remained crouched, breathing slowly.
If you want to see more content like this, the best way to ensure that is by subscribing and leaving a like. That way, YouTube understands that you are part of our community. Take advantage and leave a shout out with the name of your city below.
Letting the animal get used to her smell, to her presence, to the fact that this strange creature was not a threat. It took a few minutes. Then the cub took a step toward her. Tamara wrapped it with both arms and pressed it against her chest. She felt the tiny heart beating far too fast, the body extremely light, the tremors passing from one to the other. She opened her coat and settled the animal against her body, using her own warmth as the only remedy available down there. Getting out was harder than getting in. She used her elbows, her knees, every centimeter of strength that still remained in that old and stubborn body. The lioness stayed at the edge the entire time, without making a sound, without moving away, her eyes following every movement. When Tamara finally climbed out and stood in the snow, breathless and with her hands bleeding, the lioness approached, not in a threatening way, slowly, carefully, like someone who knows they are approaching a gesture that has no word. She smelled the cub, then she looked at Tamara, and the two began to walk together back to the cabin through the storm. The cabin had never received visitors like this. Tamara opened the door and entered first, the cub still wrapped inside her coat, the heat from the stove hitting her face like a blessing. The lioness stood at the threshold for a moment, a wild animal facing a world that was not hers. Then she took a step, then another. She entered. Tamara made no sudden movement. She placed the cub on an old blanket near the stove, folded 3 times to make an improvised nest. The little one was conscious, but weak. Its eyes followed everything with an attention that still did not have the strength to turn into fear. The lioness lay down beside the cub immediately, licking his head with a contained and silent urgency. Tamara watched that from a distance, sitting in the wooden chair where she had spent so many winters alone. There was something disturbing in the scene, not because of danger, but because of the raw intimacy. She was seeing a mother reconnect with the child she had almost lost, in silence, without an audience, without anyone asking her to restrain herself. Tamara went to the kitchen and gathered what she had. Salted meat stored for the winter, dried fish hanging from the beams, a thin broth that she warmed on the stove in a few minutes. She placed everything on the floor, near the blanket, without trying to get too close. The lioness ate slowly, her eyes always returning to Tamara between one bite and another. It was not exactly distrust. It was recognition. the slow and cautious kind that grows when an animal gradually realizes that the danger it expected simply did not arrive and will not arrive. The cub began to move more near midnight. He lifted his head firmly for the first time, sniffed the air, and then did something Tamara did not expect. He dragged himself to the edge of the blanket and pressed his snout against the tip of her boot. Tamara did not move for a long time. Outside, the snowstorm still roared violently. The cabin walls trembled with the strong gusts, and the temperature had dropped 2 more degrees since they came in. But inside there were 3 bodies warming the same small space. An old woman, a mother, and a cub who should not be alive. Tamara slowly put out the lamp and remained listening to the breathing in the darkness of the night. For the first time in many years far too long, the cabin did not seem empty. The storm passed on the morning of the 3rd day. The sun entered through the cabin window, as if asking permission, faint and golden, pouring light over the blanket where the cub slept curled against his mother's belly. Tamara had been awake for hours, sitting in the chair, watching the two as someone watches something they know will not last. And she knew, wild animals do not belong in warm little houses. That lioness had trusted her with the most precious thing she had, and that trust had a time limit. Tamara had learned this from the land, from the winter, from everything life had taught her in that remote place. Some things pass through you, transform you, and move on. And that is all right. She opened the cabin door without making a sound. The lioness lifted her head immediately. She looked at the open door, at the white world outside, at the line of pines on the horizon. Then she looked at Tamara, a long, direct look without hurry. The cub woke up, sniffed the cold air entering through the door, and stood up without trembling for the first time. They went out together, the lioness in front, the cub stumbling in the snow with his still, uncertain paws, discovering the world with a curiosity that only the very young and the very brave can have. At the edge of the clearing, the mother stopped. She turned her body. She looked at Tamara, who was standing at the cabin's threshold with her arms crossed over her chest and her eyes filled with tears. There was no sound. There were no words for that moment. The lioness turned and entered the forest. The cub ran after her, disappearing among the pines with a lightness that seemed impossible for something that 3 days earlier could barely breathe. Tamara stood at the threshold for a long time, looking at the line of trees. Then she went inside, put water on a boil, and made tea. Some stories do not need witnesses to be real. They only need 2 creatures willing to trust each other at the wrong moment, in the most unlikely place, in the middle of a storm that tried to stop everything. Tamara drank the tea slowly, alone, with a smile that no one saw. What happened? If you made it this far, leave in the comments what you thought of this story and from which city or country you are watching. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video.